As a judge at the International Court of Justice, what do you do?
The International Court of Justice is the principal judicial organ of the United Nations, and of course we sit here in The Hague. We are comprised of 15 judges. We come from countries around the world, and we're elected by the UN Security Council and the UN General Assembly. And we decide cases where the parties are countries. So unlike the International Criminal Court, for example, we don't decide criminal cases that are involving the individual liability of a person. We usually decide a case where one country brings a case against another country. And we also give advisory opinions to other organs of the United Nations like the General Assembly.
What made you want to come from the US to work in The Hague for the International Court of Justice?
Well, having devoted my career to international law, the opportunity to take the step of joining this court was an offer I couldn't refuse, if you will. This gives me a chance to work with 14 colleagues from around the world and from very different legal backgrounds often towards the shared pursuit of the peaceful resolution of disputes.
Can you give some examples of cases where the court has made a difference?
Well, frequently we have cases involving boundary disputes between countries. It's easy to understand when you think about the idea of peaceful settlement of disputes that boundary disputes, whether they're on land or at sea, can often lead to conflict. Our most recent judgment was a case in which we settled a boundary between Niger and Burkina Faso, two African countries. We're currently deliberating with respect to a maritime boundary dispute between Peru and Chile. This summer we'll hold a 3-week hearing in a case that Australia has brought against Japan. That's a case in which Australia claims that Japan's program of whaling off of Antarctica violates Japan's obligations under a whaling treaty. And then in the fall, we will hear a case that Ecuador has brought against Colombia, and there Ecuador is alleging that Colombia's program of aerial spraying, its herbicide spraying to address the problem of coca plants, Ecuador is complaining that that spraying has caused harm within Ecuador. So you can see from those cases that we hear a variety of kinds of issues and that our cases come from around the world.
What's the significance of the Peace Palace as the location of the International Court of Justice?
Well, these days there are quite a few international courts and tribunals, but the International Court of Justice, the World Court, remains the sole court that settles disputes around the world and on all topics in international law. For a court of that stature, the principal judicial organ of the United Nations, it is fitting that we would be located in The Hague and in a building with the grandeur and stature of the Peace Palace.
Back in your own country, what do you tell people about the Peace Palace and The Hague and the roles they play?
Well, whenever I speak in the United States about the International Court of Justice, I find it quite valuable to have a picture of the Peace Palace portrayed behind me, because it allows me to underscore the importance of this idea. The idea that we are striving day in and day out in The Hague, at the International Court of Justice, and at the other institutions in this city, we are striving to create pathways to solution other than force. That is really at its core what the peaceful settlement of disputes is about. So when I display the Peace Palace, I'm able to point out that the idea of peace is so important that it deserves a building of this stature, that this is the kind of building that I go to every day in my robes in an effort to achieve peace and justice.